Have you ever noticed that some women seem to magnetize both beauty and abundance effortlessly, while others struggle despite all their efforts? And have you wondered what invisible force guides those who seem to live in perpetual grace, receiving love money opportunities and admiration as naturally as breathing? While you have worked so hard and tried so many approaches, yet still find yourself looking in the mirror, feeling invisible or counting dollars that never seem to multiply, no matter how much you save or budget or plan. Tonight, I will share with you the secret that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered about Venus, the planet that governs all feminine magnetism, and how when Venus aligns in your consciousness, you become a living magnet for everything beautiful and abundant. And this is not about astrology or complicated rituals, but about a simple decree that reorganizes your entire vibrational field in 48 hours and transforms you into the woman you were always meant to be. You can close your eyes now, and everything that needs to happen will happen while you rest, because your subconscious mind never sleeps, and it is listening to every word I speak and absorbing every teaching I share. And by the time you wake tomorrow morning, whether you remember this conversation or not, something fundamental will have shifted in your energy field, and you will begin to notice that people look at you differently, that opportunities appear from nowhere, that money flows more easily, and that your reflection in the mirror shows you a woman who is finally coming alive. Her name was Joyce, and she was 59 years old when this teaching found her on a Tuesday morning at 4:47, when insomnia had kept her awake for the third night in a row, and she was sitting in her small apartment in Portland, Oregon, wearing a faded blue robe that had seen better days, with her graying hair uncombed, and her face bearing the weight of 3 years since her divorce from Marcus, who had left her. Not only heartbroken, but financially devastated, because he had convinced her to co-sign loans for his failing restaurant. And when the business collapsed, she lost not only her marriage, but her retirement savings, her credit score, and her belief that she deserved anything good. The apartment was cold that morning because she kept the thermostat at 62 degrees to save money, and the only light came from her laptop screen as she scrolled through videos, hoping to find something, anything that might help her sleep, or at least distract her from the anxiety that had become her constant companion since the lawyers had finished dividing what little remained of her life. And she could smell the stale coffee from yesterday still sitting in the pot because she had started rationing even coffee. And the silence of her empty apartment felt heavier than the weight of her debts. Joyce had been an administrative assistant for 27 years at the same company, but 3 months after her divorce, they had laid her off due to budget cuts. And now at 59, she was discovering that finding new employment was nearly impossible. Despite her experience and reliability, and her unemployment benefits had run out 6 weeks ago, and she was facing the possibility of losing her apartment by the end of the month, and the thought terrified her more than anything, because she had nowhere to go and no family close enough to help, and her reflection in the bathroom mirror each morning showed her a woman she barely recognized, whose spirit seemed to have aged 20 years in the past 3. She had applied for 63 different positions and received only 2 interviews, and both employers had clearly decided she was too old before she had even finished answering their first question. And the savings account that had once held $12,400 now showed a balance of $118.47. And she had already sold her good jewelry, her grandmother's, china, and anything else of value just to pay for basic expenses. And the shame of her situation felt almost unbearable, because she had always been the responsible one, the one who saved money and planned for the future and followed all the rules. That morning, as she sat in the dim light of her laptop, she had been searching for information about bankruptcy attorneys when somehow she clicked on a video titled, "When Venus Speaks, Women Receive," and something about the title made her pause, even though she was not particularly interested in spiritual teachings or astrology. But she was desperate enough to try anything, and the woman speaking in the video had a voice that seemed to reach directly into her heart and spoke about Florence Scovel Shinn and how this teacher from the 1920s had discovered that Venus, the planet of love and abundance, operates on a completely different frequency than the masculine energy of struggle and effort. The teacher explained that women are naturally wired to receive from Venus, but that most have forgotten how to align with this planetary energy and instead have adopted masculine approaches to money and success, which create resistance rather than flow. And she said that there was a specific decree that could realign any woman with her Venusian nature within 48 hours. And Joyce felt something stirring in her chest, something she had not felt since before her marriage fell apart, which was a tiny spark of hope mixed with curiosity. The decree was surprisingly simple, and the teacher explained that it needed to be spoken at dawn while facing east, and that the words carried a vibrational frequency that communicated directly with Venus regardless of where the planet was positioned in the sky. And Joyce wrote down the words on a piece of paper with shaking hands because something in her solar plexus was responding to this information in a way that felt both foreign and familiar, like remembering a language she had spoken in childhood. The next morning, she woke naturally at 5:38, which was unusual because she had been struggling with insomnia for months, and she felt drawn to her small balcony, even though it was cold outside, and she wrapped her old robe tighter around her body and stepped into the October air and faced east toward the mountains and spoke the decree in a whisper because she felt self-conscious about her neighbors hearing her. But as the words left her lips, something shifted in the atmosphere around her, and she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature spread through her chest. She repeated the decree 7 times as instructed, and with each repetition, her voice grew stronger and more confident. And by the 7th time, she was speaking with an authority that surprised her. And as she finished, she noticed that the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn, and she felt different in a way she could not explain, but knew was real. And she went back inside and made coffee. And for the first time in months, she looked in the bathroom mirror and saw not just the tired, worried woman of recent years, but a glimpse of someone she had forgotten existed. That same day, at 11:23 in the morning, her phone rang, and it was her former supervisor from the company where she had worked for 27 years, calling to tell her that they had received a large contract and needed experienced administrative help immediately. And would she consider returning on a contract basis at $28 per hour, which was more than she had ever made as a permanent employee. And when she said yes, the supervisor mentioned that the contract was expected to last at least 18 months, with possibility of permanent rehiring. 2 hours later, as she was walking to the grocery store to buy ingredients for a celebratory dinner, she had bumped into a man named Robert at the corner of 5th and Main Street. And when she looked up to apologize, she found herself looking into the kindest eyes she had seen in years, and he was 57 years old and had recently moved to Portland from Seattle, where he had worked as an engineer, and he was also recently divorced. And somehow they ended up having coffee that afternoon and talking for 3 hours about everything and nothing, and when he walked her home, he asked if he could see her again. By Friday morning, exactly 48 hours after speaking the Venus decree, Joyce had not only secured employment that would solve her financial crisis, but had also met a man who made her feel like a woman worth knowing. And when she looked in the mirror that morning, she saw clear evidence that something had changed in her face because her eyes were brighter. Her skin seemed to have more color, and even her posture was different, more upright and confident. And she realized that the Venus teaching had not just brought her practical solutions, but had awakened something in her that had been sleeping for years. The relationship with Robert developed naturally over the following weeks, and by Christmas they were inseparable, and by spring they were discussing marriage, and he was a man of substance who owned his home outright and had a secure retirement fund. And more importantly, he looked at Joyce as if she were the most beautiful woman in the world, and treated her with a respect and tenderness she had never experienced, even in her younger years. And she realized that Venus had not just brought her money and security, but had brought her love in a form that exceeded anything she had ever imagined possible. If this teaching resonates with you, and if you feel you were guided here tonight, then touch the subscribe button now. And it is not for me, but it is so that you receive each new teaching from Florence Scovel Shinn at the exact moment your soul needs it. Because these videos appear in your feed according to divine timing, not random algorithms, and when you subscribe, you align yourself with thousands of other women around the world who are also awakening to their Venusian nature and strengthening the collective field of feminine receiving. And in the comments, write only 3 words, which are, "I am receiving now." And this is not an affirmation, but a decree. And when you write these words, you activate collective witness, and thousands of souls write these same words, and the field strengthens for everyone, because Venus operates through connection and community, not through isolated effort, and your decree becomes part of a global chorus of women reclaiming their birthright to beauty and abundance. If you choose not to do this right now, that is perfectly fine, and your path is your own. But know that this is the moment of greatest power, when the teaching is fresh in your energy field, and your resistance has not yet had time to build walls around the possibility. So do it if you feel aligned, and trust that impulse, because Venus speaks through sudden knowing, not through logical analysis. Now you can relax completely, and you do not need to do anything, because everything I will share tonight enters you while you rest, and your subconscious is awake, and it absorbs every word, every story, every decree. And if you fall asleep in the middle, that is perfect, because when you wake, the seed will already be planted in the deepest soil of your being and will begin to sprout, according to Venus timing, not human timing. Florence Scovel Shinn was born in 1860 and lived in New York City during a time when women had very few options for financial independence, and she began as an artist and illustrator, but discovered that she possessed an unusual gift for understanding the invisible laws that govern manifestation. And she became one of the first teachers to explain that the universe operates on feminine principles of receiving and allowing, rather than masculine principles of forcing and pushing. And through her work with hundreds of clients, she discovered that Venus, the planet traditionally associated with love and beauty, actually governs all forms of abundance, and that women who learn to align with Venusian energy become natural magnets for everything they desire. She taught that most women have been conditioned to believe that they must earn, deserve, or work hard for what they want. But Venus operates on completely different principles and responds to receptivity, grace, and the inner knowing that you are already worthy of all good things. And she discovered that there are specific words, which she called decrees, that communicate directly with planetary intelligences and reorganize reality at the quantum level faster than any amount of human effort could accomplish. The principle she taught was revolutionary for her time and remains revolutionary today, because it challenges the fundamental assumption that struggle equals worthiness, and instead proposes that ease and flow are the natural state of a woman aligned with her cosmic inheritance. And she proved through countless case studies that when a woman speaks with Venus authority, not human pleading, the entire universe rearranges itself to support her desires, often in ways that seem miraculous to outside observers, but are simply the natural result of working in harmony with cosmic law rather than against it. In 1924, Florence received a visit from a woman whose name was Eleanor, and she was 52 years old, and had been widowed for 6 months when her husband Charles died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving her with 3 children still at home and debts that exceeded $15,000, which in those days was an enormous sum that would be equivalent to hundreds of thousands of dollars today. And Eleanor had no job skills beyond managing a household and no family money to fall back on, and the banker had already informed her that she would lose the house within 90 days if she could not make the payments. Eleanor arrived at Florence's apartment on East 57th Street on a rainy Thursday afternoon in November, and she was wearing a black dress that had been altered twice to hide the fact that she had lost weight from worry and stress, and her once beautiful auburn hair was now streaked with premature gray and pulled back in a severe style that did nothing to flatter her face. And she carried herself like a woman who had given up hope, but was going through the motions of seeking help, because her sister had insisted that Florence might be able to offer some guidance. The apartment was warm and filled with afternoon light from tall windows that faced south, and Florence served tea in delicate china cups that belonged to her grandmother, and she invited Eleanor to sit in a comfortable chair near the fireplace. and as Eleanor began to tell her story, Florence noticed that despite her obvious distress, there was something regal in her bearing, something that suggested she had been born for better circumstances than her current situation. And Florence interrupted her after only a few minutes and said something that would change Eleanor's life forever. She said, "Eleanor, you are speaking like a widow and an orphan, but I see a Venus woman who has temporarily forgotten her true nature." And Eleanor looked confused because she had never heard such language before. And Florence explained that Venus governs not only romantic love, but all forms of abundance, including money, property, opportunity, and the magnetism that draws helpful people into your life. And she said that widowhood is a temporary condition, but being a Venus woman is your eternal identity. And when you align with that truth, everything else becomes possible. Florence taught Eleanor a specific decree that needed to be spoken every morning at sunrise while facing east, and the words were, "I am Venus in earthly form, and all abundance flows to me naturally and effortlessly, and everything beautiful and valuable in the universe recognizes me as its rightful owner and seeks me out with divine persistence." And Eleanor wrote these words carefully in a small notebook because she had been trained to pay attention to details, and Florence explained that the decree worked not through belief, but through vibrational alignment, and that Eleanor's willingness to speak the words was more important than her ability to feel their truth. Initially, Eleanor was skeptical because she had been raised in a practical household where hard work was considered the only reliable path to success, and the idea that speaking certain words could change her. Financial situations seemed too simple to be real, but she was desperate enough to try anything, and Florence assured her that her doubt would not interfere with the process because Venus responds to willingness, not to faith, and that the planetary energy would begin working immediately, regardless of Eleanor's mental understanding. The first morning Eleanor spoke the decree, she felt foolish standing in her small garden at dawn in her nightgown and robe, but she had promised Florence she would follow the instructions exactly. And as she repeated the words 7 times as instructed, she began to feel a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun. And by the 3rd day, she noticed that she was walking differently, carrying herself with more grace and confidence, even though nothing in her external circumstances had changed yet. On the 7th day after beginning the decree, Eleanor received an unexpected visit from Mrs. Margaret Harrison, who was the wealthiest woman in their social circle, and someone Eleanor had known casually for years, but had never considered a close friend. And Mrs. Harrison explained that she had been thinking about Eleanor since hearing of Charles's death, and had decided to offer her a position managing the household affairs for her estate, which included overseeing 3 properties and a staff of 12 servants, and the salary she offered was more than Charles had earned in his best year. Mrs. Harrison explained that she needed someone with Eleanor's background and refinement who could handle delicate social situations and coordinate complex domestic arrangements. And she had always admired Eleanor's style and grace at social gatherings and felt that this arrangement would benefit both of them. And Eleanor accepted immediately, not just because she needed the income, but because something in her recognized that this opportunity was a direct response to the decree she had been speaking. Within 30 days, Eleanor had not only stabilized her financial situation, but had moved her family into a beautiful apartment provided as part of her employment, and she discovered that she had a natural talent for managing luxury households and coordinating social events. And Mrs. Harrison was so pleased with her work that she recommended Eleanor to other wealthy families. And soon, Eleanor had developed a thriving business as a domestic consultant for New York's elite families. But the most remarkable transformation was in Eleanor herself, because as she continued speaking the Venus decree each morning, she began to embody the energy of abundance in every aspect of her appearance and behavior, and her hair regained its natural luster. Her posture became naturally elegant, and men began to notice her in ways they had not since she was a young woman. And within 18 months, she had received 3 serious marriage proposals from well-established gentlemen, and she chose to marry a kind widower named Arthur, who owned a successful import business and loved her children as his own. Florence documented Eleanor's case carefully because it demonstrated perfectly how Venus energy works through what appears to be natural social connections, but is actually the result of vibrational alignment that draws the right people and opportunities into your orbit. And she taught that Venus never brings abundance through struggle or force, but always through grace and ease and what others perceive as luck or coincidence, but is really the natural result of speaking with planetary authority. The principle that Florence discovered through Eleanor's case and hundreds of others is that Venus teaches that beauty and wealth are not separate energies, but one unified vibration of receiving, and that when a woman aligns with her Venusian nature, she becomes irresistibly attractive to all forms of abundance because she embodies the frequency that prosperity recognizes as its natural home. And this is why Venus women seem to effortlessly magnetize both love and money while others struggle despite their best efforts. This principle works even while you sleep, because your subconscious mind continues processing the vibrational information contained in the decree and reorganizing your energy field to match the frequency of abundance. And this is why many women report that their most significant breakthroughs happen during the night or upon waking, because Venus energy is strongest during the hours of rest when the conscious mind is not interfering with the natural flow of cosmic intelligence through the feminine system. The word is not description, but creation. And when Florence Scovel Shinn discovered this principle, she realized that certain combinations of sounds carry vibrational frequencies that communicate directly with planetary intelligences and reorganize matter at the molecular level. And she found that Venus responds to specific tonal patterns that activate the feminine magnetic field and transform a woman into a living magnet for all forms of beauty and abundance. And this is not metaphorical, but literal, because sound waves create geometric patterns in physical reality. And when you speak with Venus authority, you are actually restructuring the quantum field around your body. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And this ancient truth that appears in sacred texts around the world points to the fundamental reality that vibrational frequency precedes physical manifestation, and that conscious beings can participate in creation through the intentional use of sound. And Florence discovered that Venus energy responds most powerfully to words spoken at dawn when the planetary influence is strongest, and the feminine receptive principle is most active in the human energy system. She taught that most people use words carelessly, as if they were simply describing reality rather than creating it. But when you understand that every word you speak sends vibrational instructions to the universe, you begin to choose your language with the precision of a master architect designing a sacred temple. And Venus words are particularly powerful because they align your personal frequency with the cosmic frequency of abundance and beauty and activate dormant codes in your DNA that remember your original design as a magnet for all good things. Her name was Rosemary, and she was 61 years old when she discovered the Venus decree that would transform her life completely, and she was living in Tucson, Arizona, in a small mobile home that she rented for $437 per month. And this was nearly half of her Social Security income, which left her with very little money for food or medical expenses. And she had been a high school English teacher for 34 years before retiring, but had never been able to save much money because she had supported her elderly mother through a long illness that consumed her savings. It was March 15th when Rosemary first heard about Florence Scovel Shinn's Venus teaching, and she was sitting in the community center attending a free lecture about senior services. When the speaker mentioned that there were spiritual principles that could improve anyone's financial situation, regardless of age or circumstances, and normally Rosemary would have dismissed such claims as wishful thinking. But something about the way the woman spoke made her pay attention, and after the lecture, she approached the speaker and asked for more information. The speaker, whose name was Linda, explained that she had learned about Venus decrees from studying Florence Scovel Shinn's work, and that she herself had used this teaching to manifest a comfortable retirement after years of financial struggle. And she gave Rosemary a small card with the Venus decree written in elegant handwriting, and told her that the most important thing was to speak these words every morning at sunrise while facing east and to continue for at least 49 days. Regardless of whether she saw immediate results, Rosemary walked home that afternoon feeling a mixture of skepticism and curiosity because she had been raised in a practical Lutheran household where hard work and frugality were considered the only reliable paths to security, and the idea that speaking certain words could change her financial situation seemed too simple to be credible. But she was also desperate enough to try anything because her savings account held only $89.63, and she was facing the possibility of having to choose between prescription medications and groceries. That evening, she read the decree carefully and noticed that the words felt different from ordinary speech, somehow more formal and ceremonial, like the language used in church services or legal documents, and the decree said, "I am a Venus woman, and beauty and abundance flow through me as naturally as breath flows through my body, and all prosperity in the universe recognizes me as its beloved daughter and seeks me out with divine persistence, and every word I speak multiplies my magnetism for all good things." The next morning, Rosemary set her alarm for 5:45 and woke in the darkness before dawn, and she put on her warmest robe because the desert air was still cold in March, and she stepped onto her small patio and faced east toward the mountains and spoke the decree in a whisper because she felt self-conscious about her neighbors hearing her. And as the words left her lips, she felt a strange tingling sensation in her chest, as if something was awakening after a long sleep. She continued this practice every morning for 7 days, and each day her voice grew stronger and more confident. And by the 7th day, she was speaking with an authority that surprised her, because she had never considered herself a particularly confident person. And she began to notice small changes in how she felt about herself and how others responded to her and the woman at the grocery store started smiling at her warmly, and the pharmacist began asking about her day instead of simply processing her prescriptions. On the 9th day, something remarkable happened because Rosemary received a phone call from her nephew David, who lived in Denver and whom she had not spoken to in over 2 years, and he explained that he had been thinking about her and wanted to offer her a part-time position helping his wife Sarah with their antique business because they needed someone with teaching experience to conduct historical tours of their shop and to help authenticate vintage items, and the pay was $22 per hour for approximately 15 hours per week. David explained that they had always admired Rosemary's knowledge of literature and history, and that many of their customers were educated people who would appreciate her expertise, and he offered to provide transportation and flexible scheduling. And when Rosemary calculated the additional income, she realized it would nearly double her monthly resources and allow her to live comfortably for the first time since retirement, and she accepted immediately with tears of gratitude in her eyes. But the most remarkable aspect of this opportunity was that it came through family connection that had been dormant for years, and Rosemary realized that the Venus decree had somehow activated relationships and possibilities that had been sleeping in her life. And as she continued the practice, she began to notice that people were treating her differently, as if they sensed something attractive and magnetic about her that had not been present before. Within 3 weeks of beginning the Venus decree, Rosemary experienced another significant shift because she started receiving compliments about her appearance from strangers and acquaintances who commented that she looked younger and more vibrant. And when she studied herself in the mirror, she had to admit that something had changed in her face because her skin seemed to have more color and her eyes were brighter, and even her posture was more upright and graceful. The antique shop position turned out to be even better than expected, because Rosemary discovered that she had a natural talent for connecting with customers and sharing historical knowledge in ways that made people want to purchase items. And within 6 months, David had offered her a small commission on sales in addition to her hourly wage, and she was earning more money than she had ever made as a teacher, while working fewer hours and enjoying every moment of her days. By the time she had been practicing the Venus decree for 6 months, Rosemary had not only solved her financial problems, but had developed a social life that included regular dinners with David and Sarah and their friends. And she had met several interesting men through the antique shop, including a retired professor named Frank, who began asking her to accompany him to cultural events and lectures. And for the first time in years, she felt like a woman with options and possibilities rather than someone simply surviving. The power of the Venus decree lies in its ability to reorganize your vibrational frequency so that you begin attracting people and opportunities that match your new energy signature. And this process happens below the level of conscious awareness, which is why many women report that their lives begin changing in ways that seem magical or coincidental, but are actually the natural result of aligning with cosmic intelligence through the precise use of sacred sound. While you sleep tonight, your subconscious mind will continue processing the vibrational information contained in these Venus teachings and reorganizing your energy field to match the frequency of abundance and beauty. And you do not need to believe or understand how this works, because Venus energy operates through willing participation, not through mental comprehension. And when you wake tomorrow, you may notice subtle shifts in how you feel about yourself and how others respond to you. And these are the first signs that the decree is working in your life. You do not attract what you want, but you attract what you are. And this is the fundamental principle that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered through her work with Venus energy. And she taught that identity transformation must precede circumstantial change, because the universe responds to your vibrational signature, not to your desires or efforts. And when you embody the identity of a Venus woman at the cellular level, everything in your external world reorganizes itself to match that inner reality. And this is why some women seem to effortlessly magnetize abundance, while others struggle, despite their best intentions. Treat yourself as the person you already are in the divine plan, Florence would tell her students. And she meant this literally, not metaphorically, because in the cosmic realm, your highest potential already exists as a completed reality. And your work is not to create this identity, but to remember and embody what has always been true about your essential nature. And when you align with your Venus identity, you activate dormant DNA codes that transform you into a magnet for all forms of beauty and abundance. The metaphor of the seed perfectly illustrates this principle, because within every seed, the complete tree already exists in potential form. And the seed does not need to learn how to become a tree or work hard to deserve treeness, but simply needs the right conditions to express its inherent nature. And similarly, within every woman, the Venus identity already exists, waiting for the right vibrational conditions to manifest. And when you speak the Venus decree, you create those conditions and allow your true nature to emerge. Her name was Diane, and she was 55 years old when she learned to embody Venus identity before her circumstances changed, and she was working as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm in Spokane, Washington, earning $31,800 per year, which was barely enough to cover her basic expenses in a modest apartment. And she had been divorced for 12 years since her husband Craig had left her for a younger woman. And the experience had destroyed her self-confidence and her belief that she deserved anything beautiful or valuable. Diane had accepted her life as a single woman living paycheck to paycheck and had convinced herself that at 55, her options were limited and that she should be grateful for employment and good health rather than hoping for romance or prosperity. And she dressed in neutral colors, bought clothes from discount stores, and had not updated her hairstyle in over 8 years. And when she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who had given up on the possibility of being attractive or successful and had settled into middle-aged invisibility. It was a cold January morning when Diane discovered Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching about Venus identity, and she was sitting in her car during her lunch break, listening to a podcast about women's empowerment, when the speaker mentioned that every woman carries within her DNA the blueprint of a goddess, and that this identity can be activated through specific practices. And Diane felt something stir in her chest, because she had not thought of herself as having any connection to goddess energy since she was a young girl playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. That evening, Diane researched Florence Scovel Shinn online and discovered the Venus identity principle, which states that you must begin treating yourself as a Venus woman immediately, regardless of your current circumstances or appearance. And this means speaking to yourself with the respect and admiration you would show to someone you considered beautiful and worthy, and dressing your body as if it were a temple, and moving through the world as if you were already the woman you want to become. The next morning, Diane stood in front of her bathroom mirror and, instead of her usual critical assessment, she looked into her own eyes and said, "I am a Venus woman, and I deserve to be treated like the goddess I am." And at first the words felt foreign and even ridiculous, but she continued speaking them every morning while getting dressed, and gradually something began to shift in how she related to her own reflection and her own body. She decided to implement small changes that reflected her new identity, and she began with her wardrobe, choosing colors that flattered her complexion instead of hiding behind beige and black, and she invested in a professional haircut that took 20 years off her appearance, and she started walking with more grace and confidence as if she were someone worth noticing, and within 2 weeks, people at work began commenting that she looked different, though they could not identify exactly what had changed. The transformation accelerated when Diane began treating herself like a woman who deserved beautiful things, and she bought fresh flowers for her apartment every Friday and replaced her worn bed sheets with luxurious cotton ones, and began taking long baths with essential oils instead of quick showers. And she started speaking to herself with kindness and encouragement instead of the harsh criticism that had been her habitual inner dialogue for years. After 6 weeks of embodying Venus identity, something remarkable happened because her supervisor, Mr. Peterson, called her into his office and offered her a promotion to senior bookkeeper with a salary increase of $12,000 per year and additional responsibilities that would allow her to work more independently. And when she asked why he had chosen her, he said that she had been carrying herself with new confidence and professionalism, and that clients had specifically commented on her helpful and gracious manner. But the most significant change occurred 3 months after Diane began practicing Venus identity, because she met a man named Robert at the grocery store when he offered to help her reach something on a high shelf, and instead of dismissing the interaction as she would have done previously, she smiled warmly and thanked him graciously, and they ended up talking for 20 minutes about everything from organic vegetables to travel experiences, and he asked for her phone number before they parted. Robert was 58 years old and owned a successful landscape design business and had been widowed for 3 years, and he was drawn to something radiant and magnetic about Diane that she herself was just beginning to recognize, and their first date led to a second and then a third, and he told her that she had a quality of inner beauty that made him feel peaceful and energized at the same time. And he had been looking for a woman with her combination of intelligence, grace, and warmth. The relationship developed naturally over the following months, and Diane discovered that when she embodied Venus identity, she attracted not just any man, but a man of quality who treated her with the respect and admiration that matched her new sense of self-worth. And Robert was generous with his affection and his resources, and he delighted in taking her to nice restaurants and cultural events and planning weekend trips to beautiful places, and he made her feel like the goddess she had learned to see herself as. Within 18 months of beginning her Venus identity practice, Diane had not only doubled her income and found genuine love, but had transformed into a woman who moved through the world with natural confidence and magnetism, and people were drawn to her warm energy and gracious manner. And she realized that the external changes had followed naturally from the internal transformation, and that embodying Venus identity had been the key that unlocked all the abundance that had been waiting for her. The layers of Venus identity include seeing yourself as naturally receptive to all good things, as magnetically attractive to helpful people and beneficial opportunities, as worthy of beauty and luxury and comfort, as deserving of love and respect and admiration. And when you embody these qualities at the cellular level, your energy field reorganizes and begins broadcasting a frequency that the universe recognizes as abundance consciousness and responds to accordingly. Venus identity work is particularly powerful during sleep because the subconscious mind processes identity information more readily when the conscious mind is not, interfering with logical objections. And this is why many women report waking up feeling different after working with Venus principles and noticing that their self-talk has become more supportive and their body language more confident without conscious effort. Financial identity requires seeing yourself as someone who naturally receives money and opportunities, as someone whose presence adds value to any situation, as someone whom others want to support and invest in. And when you embody this identity authentically, people begin offering you better positions, higher salaries, and business opportunities because they sense your inherent worth and want to be associated with your success. Relational identity involves knowing yourself as someone who deserves love and respect and kindness, as someone whose company is sought after and valued, as someone who enhances the lives of others through your presence. And when you truly embody this identity, you begin attracting people who reflect this. Knowing back to you and relationships that felt difficult or one-sided naturally resolve or dissolve. Creative identity encompasses seeing yourself as a channel for beauty and inspiration, as someone whose unique gifts are needed in the world, as someone who has valuable contributions to make. And when you align with this aspect of Venus identity, you find that creative opportunities and platforms for self-expression begin appearing in your life, often in surprising and delightful ways. And while you rest tonight, your true Venus identity emerges naturally, because sleep allows the false self that was built on limitation and unworthiness to dissolve, and the authentic self that knows your cosmic inheritance to reveal itself. And you do not need to force this process, but simply allow it to unfold and continue with me, because there is still much wisdom to receive about the journey of transformation. The nature of resistance is that it protects us from change, even when that change would bring us everything we have ever wanted. And Florence Scovel Shinn understood that when women begin aligning with Venus energy, the ego mind immediately creates obstacles and objections because it fears losing control. And she taught that resistance is not your enemy, but your teacher, showing you exactly where you need to apply the principle of surrender, and you do not need to overcome resistance through force, but only to witness it with compassion and allow something greater to move through you. She wrote that the ego fights against grace because grace threatens the story that struggle is necessary for worthiness. And when you begin receiving abundance easily, the ego panics because its entire identity is built on the belief that you must earn everything through effort and sacrifice. And this is why many women sabotage their own success just as breakthrough is about to occur, and why others feel guilty about receiving good things and unconsciously create problems to restore their familiar pattern of difficulty. Resistance is not an enemy, but a teacher, Florence would tell her students, and she meant that every resistance pattern contains valuable information about limiting beliefs that need to be released. And when you approach resistance with curiosity rather than judgment, you discover that it dissolves naturally without struggle. And you do not need to understand or analyze your resistance, but simply acknowledge its presence and choose to surrender to something greater than your fear. Her name was Judith, and she was 63 years old when she encountered every form of Venus resistance and learned to transform each one through surrender rather than struggle. And she lived in Burlington, Vermont, in a house she had inherited from her parents, and worked part-time at the local library, earning just enough to cover her property taxes and basic expenses. And she had been single for most of her adult life by choice, because she had convinced herself that spiritual growth required sacrificing. Worldly pleasures and that wanting beauty or abundance was somehow shallow or unspiritual. Judith had discovered Florence Scovel Shinn's Venus teaching on a snowy Tuesday in February while browsing spiritual books during her lunch break, and something about the title Venus Speaks to Women made her curious enough to read the introduction, and she felt an immediate attraction to the idea that femininity and abundance were naturally aligned. But as soon as she considered applying the teaching, her mind began generating a familiar list of objections and reasons why this approach would not work for someone like her. On the first day after learning the Venus decree, Judith woke at dawn with full intention of speaking the words while facing east, but as she stood by her bedroom window, preparing to begin, she heard her mother's voice in her memory, saying that nice girls do not ask for too much, and that being content with less is a virtue. And suddenly she felt overwhelming guilt about claiming any form of goddess identity, and she retreated back to bed without speaking a single word of the decree, and spent the morning convincing herself that she was too old and too practical for such nonsense. The resistance on the second day took a different form, because when Judith finally managed to speak the Venus decree, she immediately began worrying about what her neighbors would think if they heard her talking about being a goddess. And she imagined their shocked faces and whispered conversations about poor Judith having some sort of midlife crisis, and the fear of social judgment felt so intense that she could barely whisper the words. And afterwards, she felt embarrassed and foolish, as if she had been caught doing something inappropriate. By the third day, Judith was experiencing what she later recognized as spiritual resistance, because her long-held beliefs about the virtue of poverty and the danger of material desires were in direct conflict with the Venus teaching, and she found herself thinking that wanting abundance was selfish and unenlightened, and that truly spiritual people should be satisfied with basic necessities. And she nearly gave up the practice entirely because it seemed to contradict everything she had been taught about spiritual development. The fourth day brought intellectual resistance, as Judith's rational mind demanded scientific proof that speaking certain words could actually change external circumstances, and she spent hours researching quantum physics and consciousness studies looking for logical explanations, and becoming increasingly frustrated when she could not find definitive answers, and she realized that her need to understand everything mentally was preventing her from experiencing anything directly. On the fifth day, Judith encountered the resistance of unworthiness when she attempted to envision herself as a Venus woman, and immediately felt like an imposter because she believed that goddess energy was meant for younger, more beautiful women, and that claiming such an identity at 63 was ridiculous and presumptuous, and she looked in the mirror and saw only her wrinkles and gray hair and saggy skin, and could not imagine how Venus energy could possibly flow through such an ordinary aging body. The sixth day revealed the resistance of fear, because as Judith contemplated what might happen if the Venus teaching actually worked, she realized that success would require her to step out of her comfortable, invisible life and become someone more visible and dynamic, and the thought of being noticed and perhaps envied or criticized terrified her more than the thought of remaining alone and financially limited, and she understood that part of her preferred familiar suffering to unknown abundance. By the seventh day, Judith was exhausted from fighting with herself, and something in her simply surrendered, because she realized that her resistance was causing more suffering than her original problems, and she decided to speak the Venus decree, not because she believed it would work, but because she was tired of living in fear and limitation, and wanted to discover what was possible if she stopped protecting herself from her own good fortune. The moment of surrender came when Judith stood in her garden at sunrise, and instead of trying to convince herself that she deserved abundance or attempting to overcome her resistance through positive thinking, she simply acknowledged that she was afraid and unworthy and confused, and asked Venus to work through her despite her limitations. And as the words of the decree left her lips, she felt something larger than her personal will taking over the process. Within 48 hours of surrendering her resistance rather than fighting it, Judith received a phone call from the head librarian offering her a full-time position with benefits, because the previous librarian had retired unexpectedly, and they needed someone immediately who understood their system and valued their mission. And the salary was more than double what she had been earning, and included health insurance and retirement contributions that would secure her future. But the more significant change was that Judith began attracting people who appreciated her wisdom and gentle nature, and she found herself invited to book clubs and garden parties and community events where her presence was welcomed and valued. And she realized that her years of solitude had not been spiritual discipline, but fear disguised as virtue, and that Venus energy was calling her into connection and community rather than isolation. 3 months after her surrender, Judith met a man named Walter at the farmer's market, who was 67 years old and recently retired from his career as a college professor, and he was drawn to her quiet intelligence and genuine warmth, and they began meeting for coffee every Saturday morning to discuss books and philosophy and gardening, and he told her that she had a quality of deep listening that made him feel understood in ways he had never experienced before. The relationship with Walter developed slowly and naturally without pressure or drama, and Judith discovered that love after 60 could be even more satisfying than romance in youth, because it was based on genuine compatibility and mutual respect rather than passion alone. And Walter was a man of depth and integrity who valued her mind as much as her heart and who made her feel beautiful exactly as she was. By winter, Judith had not only tripled her income and found love, but had become someone she barely recognized, because the woman who had been hiding in her inherited house for years was now hosting dinner parties and leading discussion groups and planning travel adventures with Walter. And she realized that all her resistance had been protecting her from becoming the vibrant, engaged woman she had always been meant to be. The 7 forms of Venus resistance that Judith experienced are common to most women beginning this work and include guilt about claiming goddess identity, fear of social judgment, conflict with spiritual beliefs about poverty, need for logical proof, feelings of unworthiness, terror of visibility and success, and fear of the unknown, changes that abundance might bring. And each resistance contains a gift, because moving through it expands your capacity to receive. Surrender is not passive resignation, but active trust in something greater than your personal will. And when you surrender your resistance to Venus energy, you are not giving up, but giving over control to cosmic intelligence that knows exactly how to orchestrate your highest good. And this is why surrender often brings faster results than effort, because it removes the obstacles that your ego mind creates to protect you from change. The mantra for Venus surrender is, I do not need to understand, but I simply receive. And this statement acknowledges that your logical mind cannot comprehend how cosmic principles operate, but your willingness to participate is sufficient for the process to begin. And as you repeat this mantra, you gradually release the need to control outcomes and allow Venus energy to work through you in ways that exceed your imagination. Florence taught that surrender happens naturally during sleep, because the conscious mind stops interfering with the flow of cosmic energy through your system. And this is why many breakthroughs occur during dream time or upon waking, when the rational mind has not yet rebuilt its defensive barriers, and you can support this process by speaking the surrender mantra just before falling asleep. While you rest tonight, your resistance is already dissolving, not because you are fighting against it, but because you are allowing something greater to move through you. And Venus energy is gentle but persistent, and it will find ways to flow around your obstacles until they naturally release. And when you wake, you may notice that fears and objections that seemed solid yesterday feel less important and less real. The resistance is actually your protection system trying to keep you safe from change. But Venus energy is so gentle and loving that your defenses gradually recognize it as beneficial rather than threatening. And this is why the surrender process feels more like coming home than like losing something important. And what you thought you needed to protect against turns out to be exactly what you have been longing for all along. Continue resting and continue receiving, because what comes next reveals the language that Venus uses to communicate with you through signs and synchronicities, and you will learn to recognize the signals that confirm your alignment with cosmic abundance. And these signs are already being prepared in the invisible realm, waiting for the perfect moment to appear in your visible world. The universe speaks in symbols, not in words, and Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that Venus communicates through a specific language of signs and synchronicities that confirm when you are aligned with cosmic abundance. And she taught that these signs are not coincidences, but correspondences that reveal the invisible intelligence organizing reality in response to your decrees. And when you learn to read this language, you gain confidence that the process is working even before you see dramatic external changes. Signs are not accidents, but appointments made by cosmic intelligence. Florence would tell her students, and she meant that every meaningful coincidence is actually a communication from the universe, letting you know that your vibrational frequency is shifting, and that new realities are being prepared behind the scenes, and Venus signs often appear as unexpected beauty, sudden opportunities, helpful people appearing at perfect moments, and resources materializing just when you need them most. The language of Venus is particularly rich in symbols related to femininity, abundance, beauty, and connection. And these signs often come through other women who offer support or opportunities, through invitations to events that expand your social circle, through unexpected money or gifts, through compliments about your appearance, and through doors opening in areas where you had previously experienced rejection or limitation. Her name was Beverly, and she was 58 years old when she learned to read the signs that Venus was responding to her decrees. And she lived in Sacramento, California, in a small apartment near the university where she worked as an administrative assistant in the psychology department, earning $34,600 per year and struggling to keep up with rising rents and medical expenses since her health insurance had been reduced and her arthritis medications were becoming increasingly expensive. Beverly had been practicing the Venus decree for 2 weeks with mixed feelings, because while she enjoyed the ritual of greeting the dawn with sacred words, she had not yet seen any concrete changes in her circumstances, and her logical mind was beginning to question whether she was wasting her time with what might be nothing more than wishful thinking, and she was considering abandoning the practice when the first sign appeared in a way that was too specific to ignore. It was a Thursday morning in April, and Beverly was walking to work along her usual route when she noticed something glinting in the sunlight on the sidewalk. And when she looked down, she discovered a small rose gold coin that appeared to be very old and intricately designed, and as she picked it up, she realized it was not currency, but some sort of medallion with a symbol that looked like the astrological sign for Venus, and she felt a strange tingling sensation in her chest, as if her body recognized this object as significant. Beverly had never paid attention to astrology and did not know what the Venus symbol looked like, but something compelled her to research it when she arrived at work. And when she discovered that the medallion bore the exact symbol for Venus, she felt a thrill of recognition, because it seemed impossible that she would find such a specific object just 2 weeks after beginning Venus practice, and she decided to carry the medallion in her pocket as a reminder that the universe was paying attention to her spiritual efforts. The second sign appeared 3 days later when Beverly was having lunch alone in the university cafeteria and feeling particularly invisible and unnoticed when a young graduate student named Maria approached her table and said that she had been observing Beverly for weeks and admired her graceful manner and professional appearance, and wondered if she would be willing to participate in a research study about women over 50 who seemed to have maintained their vitality and confidence. Despite life challenges, Maria explained that the psychology department was conducting research on what they called successful aging, and that Beverly had been identified as someone who embodied the qualities they were studying, and she offered to pay Beverly $50 for a 2-hour interview about her life experiences and perspectives on aging. And Beverly was amazed because she had never thought of herself as someone who embodied vitality or confidence, but apparently others saw something in her that she had not recognized. The third sign came the following week when Beverly was shopping for groceries and carefully calculating the cost of each item because her budget was extremely tight, and she was standing in the produce section debating whether she could afford organic vegetables when an elderly woman approached her and complimented her beautiful smile and said that she reminded her of her daughter who lived across the country, and asked if she would like to have dinner sometime because she was lonely and enjoyed meeting interesting women. The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Helen Patterson and explained that she was 82 years old and had recently moved to Sacramento to be closer to her doctor and knew very few people in the area. And something about Beverly made her feel comfortable and hopeful about forming new friendships, and she insisted on paying for Beverly's groceries that day because she said it brought her joy to help someone who seemed so deserving and kind. Beverly was touched by this unexpected generosity and agreed to have dinner the following Saturday, and discovered that Mrs. Patterson was a fascinating woman who had traveled extensively and had many stories to share, and owned a beautiful house in the historic district, and was looking for someone trustworthy to help her with household management and correspondence and errands. And she offered Beverly a part-time position at $25 per hour for approximately 10 hours per week. The fourth sign manifested when Beverly was walking home from her dinner with Mrs. Patterson and feeling grateful for the unexpected opportunity when she noticed that the streetlights seemed unusually bright and beautiful. And as she looked up, she saw Venus shining brilliantly in the western sky, and even though she had never been particularly interested in astronomy, she felt certain that this was Venus and that the planet was somehow acknowledging her growing awareness of its influence in her life. Mrs. Patterson's offer turned out to be even more generous than Beverly had initially understood, because in addition to the hourly wage, she provided meals during work sessions and often insisted that Beverly take home leftovers and occasionally gave her clothing from her extensive wardrobe that no longer fit properly. And within a month, Beverly's financial stress had decreased significantly, and she was eating better than she had in years. The fifth sign appeared when Beverly had been working for Mrs. Patterson for 6 weeks, and had mentioned during conversation that she had always dreamed of traveling to Europe, but had never been able to afford such a trip. And Mrs. Patterson revealed that she owned a small apartment in Paris that she had not visited in 3 years, and offered to let Beverly use it for a week-long vacation if she would be willing to check on the property and handle some business matters while she was there. Beverly could hardly believe that her casual mention of a lifelong dream had resulted in such an extraordinary opportunity. And when she expressed concern about the cost of airfare, Mrs. Patterson waved away her objections and said that she had airline miles that were about to expire and would be delighted to purchase Beverly's ticket because it would give her vicarious pleasure to imagine someone she cared about enjoying Paris, and she insisted that this arrangement would benefit both of them. The sixth sign came in the form of a phone call from Dr. Richards, the department head at the university, who explained that Maria's research study had been so successful that they wanted to expand it and were looking for a mature woman with excellent communication skills to coordinate interviews with study participants, and that Beverly had been highly recommended for this position, which would pay $42 per hour for approximately 15 hours per week. Dr. Richards explained that Beverly's combination of professional experience and personal qualities made her an ideal candidate for this role, because the research required someone who could put participants at ease and ask thoughtful questions and maintain confidentiality, and he offered her a 6-month contract with possibility of extension depending on funding. And Beverly realized that between this opportunity and her work with Mrs. Patterson, she would be earning more money than she had ever made while working fewer hours at more enjoyable tasks. The progression of signs that Beverly experienced demonstrates how Venus energy works through what appears to be natural social connections and coincidences, but is actually the result of vibrational alignment that draws beneficial people and opportunities into your orbit, and each sign builds upon the previous one, creating momentum that eventually manifests as significant life transformation. The 3 levels of Venus signs include microsigns, which are small synchronicities like finding meaningful objects, receiving unexpected compliments, or noticing repeated symbols that confirm your alignment. Medium signs, which are invitations, opportunities, and helpful people appearing in your life. And macro signs, which are major transformations in income, relationships, living situations, or life direction that seem miraculous, but are actually the natural result of sustained Venus practice. Venus signs often come through the element of surprise, because the universe delights in delivering abundance in ways that exceed your imagination and expectations. And when you learn to recognize these communications, you develop confidence that cosmic intelligence is actively working in your life, even during periods when progress seems slow or invisible. The key to reading Venus signs accurately is to pay attention to anything that makes you feel more beautiful, valuable, connected, or abundant, and to notice when life begins flowing more easily, when people treat you with more respect and kindness, when opportunities appear without effort, and when resources materialize in unexpected ways. All three levels of signs are already happening for you, and perhaps you have not noticed yet, because your attention has been focused on problems and limitations rather than on the gifts and opportunities that are constantly appearing. And as you begin looking for Venus communications, you will be amazed by how much support and guidance has always been available. While you rest tonight, the signs are already being prepared in the invisible realm, and not in some distant future, but now and in the quantum field. Everything is already consummated, and what you will see in your waking life is only the manifestation in time of realities that already exist in the eternal realm. And continue with me, because there is still wisdom to receive about divine timing and the patience required for cosmic gestation. There is no time in the divine mind, Florence Scovel Shinn taught, but in the human realm, everything unfolds according to cosmic cycles and natural rhythms that cannot be rushed or forced. And she discovered that Venus operates on 8-month cycles that mirror the planet's astronomical patterns, and that understanding these cycles helps women align with divine timing rather than fighting against it. And she found that most manifestation failures result from impatience rather than lack of faith or improper technique. Venus energy teaches that timing is everything, and that premature manifestation can actually be harmful because you need time to grow into the consciousness that can sustain higher levels of abundance and beauty. And this is why the universe sometimes delays your good until you have developed the inner capacity to receive it gracefully and maintain it wisely. And the waiting period is not punishment, but preparation for blessings that will exceed your current ability to imagine. The 48-hour window that Florence observed in many Venus manifestations represents the minimum time required for vibrational realignment, but deeper transformations often require longer gestation periods. And she compared this process to pregnancy, explaining that you would not dig up a seed to see if it was growing, because you understand that growth happens in darkness and invisibility before it becomes visible, and the same principle applies to Venus manifestations. Her name was Gloria, and she was 60 years old when she learned that divine timing is always perfect, even when it appears to be impossibly late, and she was living in Portland, Oregon, in a small house that she was about to lose to foreclosure, because she had been unable to keep up with mortgage payments since losing her job as a medical receptionist 8 months earlier. And she had applied for dozens of positions without success, and her savings were completely depleted, and the bank had given her exactly 15 days to bring her account current or face eviction. Gloria had discovered Florence Scovel Shinn's Venus teaching 3 weeks before her foreclosure deadline, and had been practicing the decree faithfully every morning, while also pursuing every practical solution she could think of, including contacting social services, applying for emergency assistance, reaching out to family members who might be able to help, and even considering bankruptcy as a last resort, and she was beginning to lose hope that anything could save her home. The Venus teaching emphasized trusting divine timing, but Gloria found this principle almost impossible to accept because her deadline was approaching rapidly, and she could see no possible way that the universe could arrange a solution in such a short time frame. And she found herself alternating between desperate action and anxious prayer, and wondering if she had discovered the teaching too late to make any difference in her situation. On the 10th day of her Venus practice, Gloria received a call from a lawyer named Mr. Davidson, who explained that he had been trying to reach her for several weeks regarding an inheritance from her great-aunt Ruth, who had died 6 months earlier and left Gloria a substantial sum of money and property in her will. And apparently the notification letters had been sent to an old address and had not reached Gloria until now, when the lawyer had hired a private investigator to locate her. Mr. Davidson explained that Great-Aunt Ruth had been wealthy but reclusive and had lived in a small town in Montana where she had owned several rental properties and had accumulated significant savings over her 87 years, and had left her entire estate valued at approximately $450,000 to Gloria, because she was the only family member who had maintained contact through Christmas cards and occasional phone calls over the years, Gloria was stunned because she had barely known Great Aunt Ruth and had sent cards only out of obligation, not because she expected anything in return, and she had not even known that her aunt owned property or had substantial savings, because Ruth had lived very modestly and had never mentioned her financial situation during their brief annual conversations. And the timing seemed impossible because the inheritance would solve not only her immediate crisis, but would provide long-term security. Mr. Davidson explained that the probate process had been complicated because several distant relatives had attempted to contest the will, but their claims had been resolved just days earlier, and he could arrange for Gloria to receive an immediate advance of $50,000 to handle her emergency situation, while the remainder of the estate was being finalized. And Gloria realized that this solution had been in motion for months, while she had been unaware that any help was coming. The most remarkable aspect of Gloria's experience was that if the inheritance had come earlier, she might have used the money less wisely, because her recent financial crisis had taught her the value of every dollar and had motivated her to research investment strategies and financial planning in ways she had never considered when money came easily, and she realized that the delay had actually prepared her to handle substantial wealth more responsibly. When Gloria called the bank to arrange payment of her overdue mortgage, she discovered that her account had been scheduled for foreclosure proceedings to begin the following Monday, exactly 15 days from when she had started the Venus practice, and the timing was so precise that it seemed orchestrated by intelligence that knew exactly how much pressure she could handle and exactly when relief needed to arrive. The inheritance also came with Great Aunt Ruth's house in Montana, which was a charming Victorian cottage in excellent condition surrounded by 3 acres of beautiful gardens, and Gloria decided to keep this property as a vacation retreat and discovered that the rental income from the other properties provided her with a steady monthly income that exceeded her previous salary and allowed her to pursue interests and activities that had been impossible when she was struggling financially. 6 months after her near foreclosure, Gloria met a man named Kenneth at a gardening workshop in Montana, where she was learning to maintain her inherited property, and he was a retired engineer who had moved to the area for the outdoor recreation opportunities and was drawn to her combination of groundedness and joy. And they began spending time together, hiking and gardening and exploring the natural beauty of the region. The relationship with Kenneth developed slowly and naturally because Gloria was no longer desperate for security or companionship, but was genuinely interested in sharing her life with someone who appreciated the simple pleasures that wealth had made possible. And she realized that her financial crisis had actually led her to the love of her life, because without the inheritance, she would never have spent time in Montana, where Kenneth lived. Gloria's story illustrates how Venus timing operates according to cosmic intelligence rather than human urgency, and how what appears to be delay is actually divine precision, ensuring that all elements align perfectly for maximum benefit and growth. And she learned that trusting the process, even when circumstances seem desperate, allows the universe to orchestrate solutions that exceed anything you could have planned or imagined. The gestation period for Venus manifestations varies according to the magnitude of the transformation required, and simple adjustments in income or opportunities may appear within days or weeks, while complete life restructuring often requires months or years of invisible preparation. And this is why consistent practice is more important than immediate results, because you are participating in a process larger than your conscious understanding. Living the weight means continuing your daily life with expanded awareness rather than putting everything on hold until your manifestation appears. And this means making decisions based on your new identity rather than your current circumstances, and trusting that every action you take from Venus consciousness contributes to the momentum building in the invisible realm. Divine time operates on principles of readiness, ripeness, and perfect coordination of multiple factors. And when you try to force timing through anxiety or manipulation, you actually slow the process because you are working against cosmic flow rather than with it. And this is why surrender and trust accelerate manifestation, while effort and control create resistance. Venus cycles often include periods of apparent setback or challenge that are actually necessary parts of the transformation process, because old patterns and relationships that cannot support your new level of abundance must be dissolved before higher realities can stabilize. And these transitions can feel uncomfortable, but are evidence that the process is working, not that it is failing. While you sleep tonight, divine time is operating not according to your schedule, but according to perfect cosmic timing that takes into account factors and connections and preparations that your conscious mind cannot perceive, and you can trust this process completely, because Venus energy is both gentle and persistent and will continue working until your transformation is complete. The wait is not empty time, but gestation time, during which invisible forces are arranging circumstances, people, opportunities, and resources in ways that will support your highest good and most expanded expression. And when the manifestation finally appears, you will understand why the timing was perfect and why earlier arrival would have been less beneficial. Continue allowing and continue receiving, because what comes next reveals how Venus energy operates through collective fields and how your transformation contributes to the awakening of feminine power throughout the world. And you are not alone in this process, but part of a global community of women reclaiming their birthright to beauty and abundance. When you decree with Venus energy, you are not alone, but connected to an invisible community of women throughout time who have aligned with this same cosmic principle. And Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that feminine spiritual power amplifies exponentially when women support each other's manifestations rather than competing for limited resources. And she taught that calling upon spiritual witnesses during your Venus practice creates a field of collective intention that makes miracles not only possible, but inevitable. The power of testimony lies in its ability to anchor new realities in collective consciousness. Florence would explain, and when one woman demonstrates that Venus principles work, it becomes easier for all women to achieve similar results because the pathway has been established in the morphic field. And this is why sharing success stories and supporting each other's dreams creates a rising tide that lifts every woman who aligns with Venus energy. Florence taught that you could invoke the presence of invisible witnesses during your Venus practice, and that these witnesses could include women you know personally, ancestral spirits, feminine archetypes like the goddesses of various traditions, and even the planetary consciousness of Venus itself. And when you speak your decree in the presence of these witnesses, you tap into the accumulated power of feminine wisdom throughout history. Her name was Evelyn, and she was 57 years old when she learned to call upon invisible witnesses to amplify her Venus practice. And she was living in Phoenix, Arizona, working as a night shift nurse in a hospital emergency room, and struggling to support her elderly mother who had dementia and required expensive specialized care that insurance did not cover. And Evelyn had been working double shifts for 2 years, trying to keep up with medical bills, and had reached a point of physical and emotional exhaustion that she feared might affect her ability to provide safe patient care. Evelyn had been practicing the Venus decree for 3 weeks with some small improvements in her energy level and attitude, but no significant changes in her financial situation. And she was beginning to wonder if her circumstances were too challenging for spiritual principles to address when she learned about the practice of invoking witnesses and decided to experiment with this approach because she was desperate enough to try anything that might amplify the effectiveness of her practice. The instruction was to choose 3 witnesses who embodied different aspects of feminine power and to invite their presence before speaking the Venus decree. And Evelyn chose her grandmother Rose, who had raised 7 children during the Depression and always seemed to manifest what her family needed, her friend Sarah, who had built a successful business from nothing, and the archetypal energy of Venus herself as the cosmic mother who provides for all her daughters. On the first morning that Evelyn practiced with witnesses, she stood in her small backyard facing east in the pre-dawn darkness and spoke aloud, inviting grandmother Rose to witness her decree, and immediately felt a warm presence surrounding her, as if loving arms were embracing her. And then she called upon Sarah and felt a surge of confidence and determination. and finally she invoked Venus and felt herself connected to something vast and feminine and infinitely abundant. As Evelyn spoke the Venus decree in the presence of these three witnesses, the words seemed to carry more power and authority than when she had spoken them alone, and she felt as if she were part of a cosmic conversation that had been ongoing throughout time, and that her voice was joining a chorus of women who had always known their divine birthright to abundance and beauty and love. The first sign that the witness practice was working came 2 days later when the charge nurse approached Evelyn during her shift and mentioned that the hospital was starting a new program for experienced nurses who wanted to transition into teaching and administration, and asked if Evelyn might be interested in applying for a position that would offer day hours, better pay, and the opportunity to develop educational materials for new nurses. The position offered a salary increase of $18,000 per year, plus benefits that included tuition reimbursement for advanced education and flexible scheduling that would allow Evelyn to spend more time with her mother during the day when her confusion was less severe and the work would be less physically demanding than emergency nursing, and would draw upon Evelyn's 25 years of experience in ways that felt meaningful and sustainable. But the most remarkable aspect of this opportunity was that it had come through recommendation from Dr. Martinez, who had observed Evelyn's patient care and communication skills and had specifically requested that she be considered for the position. And Dr. Martinez was someone Evelyn had worked with for years, but had never imagined saw her as anything more than a competent staff nurse, and the recognition felt like a gift from the universe, acknowledging her value and dedication. 3 weeks after beginning the witness practice, Evelyn received an unexpected phone call from her cousin Linda in Colorado, who explained that she had been thinking about Evelyn and their shared concern for elderly family members, and had an idea that might benefit both of them. And Linda had recently inherited a large house with a separate guest apartment and was looking for someone trustworthy to rent the apartment while also helping to care for Linda's father, who had mild cognitive decline. Linda proposed that Evelyn and her mother could live in the guest apartment rent-free in exchange for Evelyn providing professional oversight of both elderly parents, and she offered to pay Evelyn an additional monthly fee for this service. And she pointed out that Colorado had lower cost of living than Arizona and better resources for dementia care, and that the arrangement would provide security and companionship for all 4 adults involved. The offer seemed too good to be true, but as Evelyn considered it, she realized that relocating to Colorado would allow her to leave the stressful hospital environment and create a more sustainable lifestyle while still using her nursing skills in a way that felt purposeful and loving. And the financial benefits would be significant because eliminating rent and utilities would effectively double her disposable income. When Evelyn shared this opportunity with her mother during one of her more lucid moments, her mother surprised her by expressing enthusiasm about the move and saying that she had always loved Colorado and had fond memories of visiting there as a young woman, and she seemed to understand that the change would be beneficial for both of them. And Evelyn took this as confirmation that the universe was orchestrating a solution that honored everyone's needs. The transition to Colorado happened more smoothly than Evelyn had dared to hope, because Linda had connections in the healthcare community and helped Evelyn find part-time nursing work that allowed her to maintain her professional skills while still having time for family caregiving. And the mountain environment seemed to have a calming effect on both elderly parents, and everyone adjusted to the new living arrangement with surprising ease. 6 months after invoking her 3 witnesses, Evelyn found herself living in beautiful surroundings with financial security, meaningful work, and a support system that included Linda and her family. And she realized that the solution had come through feminine connection and collaboration rather than through individual effort, and that calling upon witnesses had somehow activated a network of support that she had not known existed. The relationship with Linda deepened into genuine friendship as they discovered shared interests in gardening, cooking, and spiritual practices. And Linda introduced Evelyn to a community of women who gathered monthly to support each other's personal growth and business ventures. And Evelyn found herself part of a sisterhood that celebrated each member's success and provided encouragement during challenging times. Evelyn's experience demonstrates how the witness practice activates collective feminine power by connecting your individual intention with the broader field of women who are also aligning with Venus energy. And when you consciously invoke this support, you tap into wisdom, strength, and resources that extend far beyond your personal capacity and create momentum that can overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. The three witnesses that Evelyn chose represent the three primary sources of feminine spiritual power, which are ancestral wisdom, embodied by grandmothers and female lineage holders; contemporary sisterhood, represented by friends and colleagues who support your growth; and cosmic feminine energy, channeled through goddesses, archetypes, and planetary consciousness, and calling upon. All three creates a complete field of support. Grandmother Rose represented the wisdom of women who survived difficult times through faith and resourcefulness, and her presence reminded Evelyn that she carried the strength of generations of women who had overcome seemingly impossible challenges, and that this ancestral power was available to support her own transformation. Sarah embodied the energy of women who create abundance through vision and determination, and her witness presence activated Evelyn's confidence in her own abilities and reminded her that contemporary women were achieving extraordinary success by aligning feminine intuition with practical action, and that such achievement was possible for her as well. Venus, as cosmic witness, connected Evelyn to the planetary intelligence that governs all feminine receiving and abundance, and reminded her that she was not asking for personal favors, but aligning with cosmic principles that support the flourishing of all life, and that her individual transformation served the greater awakening of feminine power on Earth. The collective field of Venus practitioners exists in the quantum realm, where all consciousness is connected. And when you align with this field through witness practice, you contribute your energy to the collective, while also drawing upon the accumulated power of thousands of women who are working with the same principles. And this mutual support accelerates everyone's progress. Thousands of souls are decreeing with you now while they sleep, and you can feel this support as a warm presence surrounding you during your own practice, and you do not need to see these women or know their names, because the connection exists at the level of consciousness and intention, and every time you speak your Venus decree, you strengthen the field for all participants. While you rest tonight, you are being sustained by this collective field of feminine awakening, and women around the world are speaking Venus decrees and embodying goddess identity and supporting each other's transformations, and you are part of this global sisterhood, whether you realize it consciously or not, and your success contributes to the success of all. You are not alone, and you never have been, because Venus energy connects all women across time and space. And the grandmother who survived the depression, the entrepreneur building her business, the spiritual seeker discovering her power, and the cosmic mother nurturing all creation, are all aspects of the same feminine force that flows through you and supports your highest manifestation. Continue with me now, because we are approaching the final teachings and the most powerful stories, and you will learn how to integrate everything you have received into a climactic moment of transformation that seals your Venus identity permanently and prepares you for the decree that will change everything you have heard about the word as decree that reorganizes reality through sacred sound, and about identity that precedes manifestation, creating vibrational signatures that attract corresponding experiences, and about resistance and surrender that transforms obstacles into gateways for grace, and about signs and divine timing that reveal cosmic intelligence orchestrating perfect solutions, and about collective witness that amplifies individual power through feminine connection. And now comes the story that demonstrates how all these principles unite in one moment of complete transformation that exceeds everything you thought possible. This is the story of a woman who lost everything and discovered that having nothing left to lose became her greatest advantage, because it freed her to embody Venus identity completely without the caution and reservation that keep most people trapped in familiar limitation. And her journey illustrates how crisis can become the catalyst for miraculous breakthrough when you apply Venus principles with absolute commitment and trust. Her name was Marilyn, and she was 56 years old, when her life collapsed so completely that she had no choice but to surrender everything to cosmic grace, and she was living in Tampa, Florida, in a house she had owned for 18 years, with her husband Donald, until he died suddenly of a massive heart attack while they were watching television on a quiet Sunday evening. And his death began a cascade of revelations that destroyed every assumption she had made about her security and future. Donald had been managing their finances for their entire 23-year marriage, and Marilyn had trusted him completely and never questioned his decisions about investments and insurance and retirement planning. And she discovered after his funeral that he had made a series of catastrophic financial choices, including borrowing against their life insurance, taking a second mortgage on their home, and investing their retirement savings in a business venture that had failed 3 years earlier, leaving them essentially bankrupt. The house that Marilyn thought was paid off actually carried a debt of $187,000, and the life insurance policy that should have provided security had been depleted to cover Donald's gambling debts, which she had known nothing about, and the retirement accounts she had assumed would support her were empty, and she learned that Donald had been borrowing money from credit cards to maintain their lifestyle and pay basic expenses, and the total debt exceeded $300,000. Marilyn had worked part-time as a substitute teacher for the past 10 years, but had no career or income sufficient to handle such massive debt. And at 56, she was too young for Social Security and too old for most employers to consider seriously, and the house was already in foreclosure proceedings. And she had received notice that her utilities would be disconnected if she could not pay the overdue balances within 30 days, and she had no family wealthy enough to help and no assets left to sell. The emotional devastation was as overwhelming as the financial crisis, because Marilyn felt betrayed by the man she had loved and trusted for over 2 decades, and she questioned every memory of their marriage, wondering what else had been hidden from her, and she blamed herself for being naive and passive and not paying attention to their finances, and she struggled with shame and anger and grief all at the same time while trying to figure out how to survive. 3 weeks after Donald's funeral, Marilyn was sitting in her empty kitchen because she had already sold most of their furniture to pay for the funeral expenses, and she was contemplating declaring bankruptcy and moving into a homeless shelter when her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, knocked on her door with a plate of homemade tamales and asked how she was managing. And when Marilyn broke down and told her the truth, Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned that she had recently attended a lecture about spiritual principles for women facing crisis. Mrs. Rodriguez explained that the speaker had discussed the teachings of Florence Scovel Shinn and had emphasized that women possess an innate connection to cosmic abundance that can be activated even in the most desperate circumstances, and she gave Marilyn a small book about Venus energy and suggested that she might find comfort in reading about other women who had overcome impossible situations through spiritual practice rather than practical solutions. That night, Marilyn read the entire book in one sitting because she had nothing else to do and no other hope to cling to, and she was struck by stories of women who had transformed their lives completely through aligning with Venus energy and speaking specific decrees, and she realized that she had reached the point where conventional approaches were useless, and she was willing to try anything that offered even the possibility of hope. The Venus identity principle resonated with Marilyn immediately because she understood that she had spent her entire adult life defining herself through her relationship with Donald and her role as his wife. And now that he was gone, she had no identity left, and perhaps this emptiness could become an advantage if she chose to fill it with something more powerful than her previous limited sense of self. The next morning, Marilyn stood in her backyard at dawn, wearing the same black dress she had worn to Donald's funeral, because it was one of the few nice outfits she had not yet sold, and she spoke the Venus decree for the first time, feeling simultaneously ridiculous and desperate and strangely hopeful. And as the words left her lips, she felt something shift in her chest, as if a door that had been locked for decades was finally opening. She continued the Venus practice every morning for 7 days, speaking the decree with increasing conviction, because she literally had nothing left to lose, and no reputation to protect, and no image to maintain. And this complete surrender to the process allowed Venus energy to work through her without the resistance that usually limits manifestation, and she began to notice that her posture was becoming more upright and her voice more confident. On the 8th day, Marilyn received a phone call from an attorney named Mr. Williamson, who explained that he had been trying to locate her for several weeks regarding the estate of her great-uncle Robert, who had died 4 months earlier and left her a substantial inheritance, and apparently the notification had been delayed because the executor had been hospitalized and the legal process had been more complicated than expected. Mr. Williamson explained that great-uncle Robert had been a successful real estate developer who had never married and had always been fond of Marilyn, even though they had not stayed in close contact after she married Donald, and he had left her his entire estate, including 2 apartment buildings in downtown Tampa that generated monthly rental income of approximately $12,000 and a portfolio of stocks and bonds worth over $800,000. Marilyn was stunned because she had barely known great-uncle Robert and had not seen him in over 5 years and had certainly never expected to inherit anything from him. And the timing seemed impossible because the inheritance would not only solve her immediate crisis, but would provide long-term financial security far beyond anything she had enjoyed, even during her marriage, and she wondered if this could possibly be connected to her Venus practice. Mr. Williamson arranged for her to receive an immediate advance of $100,000 to handle her emergency debts while the estate was being finalized, and when Marilyn called the mortgage company to arrange payment of her overdue loan, she discovered that the foreclosure proceedings could be halted immediately and that she would have enough money not only to save her house, but to pay off the entire mortgage and all of Donald's debts. The inheritance also included great-uncle Robert's own house, which was a beautiful Mediterranean-style villa in one of Tampa's most exclusive neighborhoods, and Marilyn decided to move into this property and rent out her former home, which would provide additional monthly income and allow her to start fresh in an environment that carried no painful memories of her marriage. But the most remarkable transformation was in Marilyn herself, because as she began to embody the identity of a wealthy, independent woman, she discovered aspects of her personality that had been dormant during her marriage, and she realized that she had always deferred to Donald's preferences and opinions and had never fully expressed her own interests and creativity. And now she had the freedom and resources to explore who she really was. Within 3 months of beginning her Venus practice, Marilyn had not only achieved complete financial security, but had started taking art classes and traveling to places she had always wanted to visit. And she discovered that she had a natural talent for interior design and began redecorating her new home with colors and furnishings that reflected her personal taste rather than compromising with someone else's preferences. The social transformation was equally dramatic because Marilyn began attending cultural events and joining community organizations, and she met interesting people who appreciated her intelligence and creativity, and she realized that her marriage had isolated her from friendships and activities that would have nourished her spirit, and she began building a social life that truly reflected her values and interests. 6 months after Donald's death, Marilyn met a man named Frank at an art gallery opening, and he was 62 years old and recently retired from his career as an architect, and he was drawn to her combination of elegance and depth, and they discovered shared interests in art and travel and philosophy, and he told her that she had a quality of inner radiance that made him feel inspired and grateful to be in her presence. The relationship with Frank developed slowly because Marilyn was determined never again to lose herself in someone else's identity. But she discovered that love after loss could be even more meaningful than first love because it was based on genuine compatibility and mutual respect rather than need or dependency. And Frank was a man of integrity who encouraged her independence and celebrated her successes. By the time she had been practicing Venus principles for 1 year, Marilyn had transformed from a dependent widow facing homelessness into a confident, independent woman with substantial wealth, meaningful relationships, and creative pursuits that brought her joy. And she realized that Donald's death, though devastating, had actually freed her to become the woman she was always meant to be. The most profound realization came when Marilyn understood that Great Uncle Robert's inheritance had been available all along, waiting for the right moment to appear, and that her financial crisis had been necessary to prepare her to receive and manage substantial wealth responsibly. And she recognized that if the money had come while Donald was alive, it would have enabled his destructive behaviors rather than freeing her to discover her true identity. Marilyn's story demonstrates how Venus energy can work through apparent disaster to create breakthrough, and how surrendering completely to cosmic grace, when you have nothing left to lose, allows miracles to manifest without the limitation and resistance that usually constrain human experience, and her transformation exceeded anything she could have imagined or planned through conventional approaches. The climactic moment of Marilyn's journey came when she was standing in the garden of her new home 6 months after Donald's death, surrounded by beauty and abundance, and she suddenly felt his presence and heard his voice saying that he was sorry for the deception and grateful that his death had led to her liberation, and she realized that even his betrayal had been part of a larger plan that she could not have understood while she was living it. In that moment, Marilyn felt a profound sense of forgiveness and completion, and she spoke aloud, saying, "I am Venus in earthly form, and I have always been abundant and loved and free." And as these words left her lips, she felt the final pieces of her old identity dissolve completely, and she knew with absolute certainty that she would never again doubt her worthiness or power or ability to create whatever life she desired. This is the moment of recognition that awaits every woman who commits fully to Venus principles, because when you surrender your small, limited sense of self, you discover that you are actually an expression of cosmic feminine power that has always been abundant and beautiful and free. And this recognition changes everything, because you can never again believe the lies that kept you trapped in limitation. The B. Story of Marilyn reveals how Venus energy works through apparent endings to create new beginnings, and how what seems like disaster can actually be the universe clearing space for miracles. And when you trust this process completely, even in your darkest moments, you allow cosmic intelligence to orchestrate solutions that exceed your wildest dreams. And now, you are ready to receive the final seal, because you have heard how Venus principles work through word and identity and surrender and signs and timing and community and crisis and transformation, and your subconscious has absorbed every teaching and every story and is already beginning to reorganize your reality according to these cosmic laws. Breathe deeply with me now, even if you are sleeping, because your body knows, and the moment of the final decree has arrived, and it is not your decree, but the decree that speaks through you, the truth that has always been true, and what follows will seal your Venus identity permanently and activate your magnetism for all forms of beauty and abundance. Even if you are sleeping, something in you is awake, and this part of you never sleeps and exists beyond time and space and limitation. And it hears every word I will speak now, and it recognizes these words as commands from cosmic authority, and it responds immediately to reorganize your entire vibrational signature according to Venus law. And you do not need to understand or believe, but only to allow these words to enter the deepest levels of your being. This part of you that never sleeps is your eternal Venus identity that existed before you were born into this body and will continue after you leave it. And this identity knows that beauty and abundance and love are your natural state, and that limitation and struggle and lack are temporary illusions that dissolve when you remember who you really are and align with your cosmic inheritance. Breathe with me now, and I will guide you into the rhythm that opens all channels and clears all resistance, and allows Venus energy to flow through you without obstruction. And breathe in slowly for 4 counts, feeling your chest expand and your shoulders relax. And hold this breath for 4 counts while you feel yourself connected to something vast and feminine and eternally abundant. And breathe out slowly for 6 counts, releasing everything that is not aligned with your highest good. Breathe in again for 4 counts and feel yourself drawing in golden light that carries the essence of Venus energy, and hold for 4 counts while this light fills every cell of your body, and breathe out for 6 counts, releasing all doubt and fear and unworthiness, and continue breathing in this rhythm, while I speak the words that will seal your transformation permanently. Now I call upon the presence of Venus herself, the cosmic mother, who provides for all her daughters, and I invite her to witness these decrees and to activate them with her full authority. And I call upon the presence of Florence Scovel Shinn and all the women throughout time who have aligned with Venus energy, and I ask them to add their power to these words, and I call upon your own highest self, the Venus woman you have always been, to step forward now and claim her birthright. The first seal comes in 3 waves of increasing power, and you will feel each wave moving through your body, reorganizing your cells and awakening dormant codes in your DNA. And even if you are sleeping, your body will respond, because these words carry vibrational frequencies that communicate directly with your subconscious and your energy field. First wave spoken with gentle authority. Venus flows through me now, and this is not a request, but a statement of eternal truth. And I feel this energy moving through my heart and spreading throughout my body, and I am no longer separate from cosmic abundance, but am a living expression of it, and Venus flows through me now, and it cannot be otherwise, because this is who I have always been. Second wave spoken. With natural confidence, Venus flows through me now, and every cell of my body remembers its divine design, and every thought I think aligns with beauty and prosperity, and every word I speak multiplies my magnetism, and every action I take serves my highest flourishing, and Venus flows through me now, and it cannot be otherwise, because this is the law of my being. Third wave spoken with cosmic authority. Venus flows through me now, and all abundance in the universe recognizes me as its beloved daughter, and seeks me out with divine persistence, and money flows to me from expected and unexpected sources, and opportunities appear effortlessly in my path, and people are drawn to support my success, and Venus flows through me now, and it cannot be otherwise, because I am Venus in earthly form. Feel these words settling into your bones and your blood and your breath, and know that they are now active in your energy field, and will continue working while you sleep and while you wake, and will manifest as concrete changes in your life within the divine timing that serves your highest good, and you do not need to force or help or worry, because the process is now unstoppable. The second seal establishes your permanent identity as a Venus woman, and these words will reprogram your subconscious mind to see yourself as you truly are, rather than as you have been conditioned to believe you are. And this identity shift will automatically attract experiences that match your new self-concept. First wave spoken. With quiet knowing, I am a Venus woman, and this is not something I am becoming, but something I have always been. And I carry myself with the grace and confidence of someone who knows her worth, and I speak with the authority of someone who expects to be heard and respected. And I am a Venus woman, and beauty and wealth are my birthright, and it cannot be otherwise. Second wave spoken with growing confidence. I am a Venus woman, and I magnetize abundance effortlessly, because prosperity recognizes me as its natural home. And I attract love easily, because I embody the frequency that draws healthy relationships, and I create beauty wherever I go, because I am beauty expressing itself in human form. And I am a Venus woman, and beauty and wealth are my birthright, and it cannot be otherwise. Third wave spoken with absolute certainty. I am a Venus woman, and every day I become more magnetic and more radiant and more prosperous, and people see me differently because I see myself differently, and opportunities appear because I expect them, and money comes because I know I deserve it, and love finds me because I am love, and I am a Venus woman, and beauty and wealth are my birthright, and it cannot be otherwise. These identity decrees are now written in the quantum field, and will override any programming that suggests you are less than magnificent, and will attract experiences that confirm your new understanding of yourself. And you will notice within days that people treat you with more respect and kindness, and that opportunities begin appearing more frequently. The third seal activates your permanent connection to Venus energy so that you remain aligned with cosmic abundance regardless of external circumstances. And this connection transcends space and time and cannot be disrupted by temporary challenges or apparent setbacks because it is established in the eternal realm where all possibilities exist simultaneously. First wave, with sacred reverence, I am connected to Venus energy now and always, and this connection grows stronger every day, and I feel supported by cosmic intelligence in all my endeavors. And I trust divine timing completely because I know that everything unfolds for my highest good. And I am connected to Venus energy now and always, and this connection is unbreakable and eternal. Second wave, with mystical authority, I am connected to Venus energy now and always. And through this connection, I access unlimited abundance and infinite love and eternal beauty. And I am part of the cosmic web that connects all women throughout time and space. And I draw upon the wisdom and power of my sisters across the galaxies, and I am connected to Venus energy now and always. And this connection is unbreakable and eternal. Third wave, with cosmic power. I am connected to Venus energy now and always. And this connection makes all things possible because I am aligned with the creative force of the universe, and I am a co-creator with cosmic intelligence, and my desires are fulfilled easily because they arise from my divine nature, and I am connected to Venus energy now and always, and this connection is unbreakable and eternal. Feel this connection as a golden cord of light extending from your heart to the planet Venus, and know that this cord can never be severed and will provide you with constant access to feminine cosmic power, and will guide you to make choices that serve your highest flourishing, and will attract people and opportunities that support your Venus identity. And now, the final sealing that makes all these changes permanent and irreversible and locks in your transformation at the cellular level and in the quantum field and in your Akashic record, so that you can never again fall into the illusion of powerlessness or unworthiness. And this sealing will protect your Venus identity from interference by others or by your own temporary moments of doubt. And so it is sealed in the name of Venus and by the authority of cosmic law and through the power of divine feminine wisdom, and with the witness of all women who have walked this path before you, and for the benefit of all women who will follow. And so it is sealed, and it cannot be undone, and it shall manifest in perfect divine timing for your highest good and the good of all. And so it remains throughout time and space, and beyond death and birth, and through all dimensions and realities, and in every lifetime and incarnation. And so it remains written in light, and sealed in love, and protected by cosmic law, and witnessed by Venus herself. And so it remains now and always and eternally. And it cannot be otherwise, because this is who you have always been. And you are simply remembering your true nature and stepping into your cosmic inheritance and claiming your rightful place as Venus in earthly form. And it cannot be otherwise, because you are not separate from divine abundance, but are its perfect expression. And so it is spoken, and so it is sealed, and so it is done. And the word of Venus is final and cannot be changed or challenged or diminished. And what has been decreed will manifest in the perfect time and perfect way for your ultimate joy and fulfillment. And so it is. You can continue resting now and allow these seals to integrate fully into your energy system, and know that everything that needed to enter has already entered and is now working at levels deeper than conscious awareness. And when you wake, you will be different, not because something new has been added, but because you have remembered what was always true about your divine nature. When you open your eyes, you may notice that colors seem brighter and sounds seem clearer, and your body feels lighter and more graceful, and people respond to you differently because you are broadcasting a new frequency. And over the coming days and weeks, you will see concrete evidence that your Venus identity is manifesting as improved relationships, increased income, new opportunities, and enhanced beauty. Do not question the process or try to figure out how it works, but simply notice the changes as they appear and receive them with gratitude and grace, and know that every good thing that comes to you is confirmation that you are indeed Venus in earthly form, and that beauty and abundance are your eternal birthright. Rest now in the knowing that you are loved beyond measure and supported by cosmic intelligence, and destined for joy and prosperity and beauty and all the desires of your heart, because you are not separate from the creative force of the universe, but are its perfect feminine expression. And everything you need is already prepared and waiting for the perfect moment to appear. It is finished, and it is sealed, and it is done. And you are Venus awakened, and your life will never be the same, because you can never again forget who you truly are. And the universe will spend eternity confirming this truth through endless blessings and miraculous manifestations and perfect love. And so it is.